much for being here. Welcome to Dying to Live.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy that you're doing this podcast and having these conversations. So pumped.
Oh, thank you. Do you remember like laying on the ground in the woods in 2018 and talking about this and all the things that each of us like we're going to evolve into and cook up and things?
I do. I guess this is the last time I saw you in person. We were laying in the woods together talking about that. Oh, I miss doing that. Yeah, it's so cool to see what's happened for both of us since then.
Oh, I mean, talk about evolutions. I mean, this whole podcast is about, shedding the things that no longer serve and allowing space for what wants to be. So those are conversations you and I have had for years now, and I'm excited to connect on it today. And I wanted to see if we could start. We have so many things to cover, but I wanted to see if we could start with on the career front. When I first met you, you were engaged in one kind of passion and industry, really, and have evolved into kind of a totally different conversation over the years. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that because I know it was a big shift for you, and I know some of the subject matter, at the time there was a lot of fear about how it would be received. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I thought I wanted to be a blogger. I thought I wanted to be a DIY blogger.
I mean, don't we all?
Okay, so I started basically as I was working in corporate marketing and just felt like compelled to make things with my hands and take pictures of them. And I started a blog, and Pinterest was just becoming a big thing. And so it like started picking up on Pinterest. And then I just was like, I'm a blogger. I called myself the Dabblist. And I had a little thing going. I had a little business. I made like handmade, like hand making holiday gifts kit that I sent to you. And I taught classes on how to like make your own makeup and skincare, and I was like full on. And it was always like fitting a square peg in a round hole as far as like a career. It was a really good idea and I was good at it. And that's something that I've really had to contend with is like, I can get pumped about a lot of things in human design. I'm a manifesting generator. I like to have my hand in a lot of pots. And I get excited about things, but then I also like get over things. I also get over things. And I realized honestly, it started with a lot of like fraudy feelings and imposter syndrome, looking at like these other bloggers and these other sort of people in the DIY niche and realizing like they were doing it so much better than me and they loved it way more than I did. And it never felt quite right. And so it always kind of felt like not my little costume to wear. I was just like, this does not feel good. And I just kept forcing it because like I quit my marketing job. So like, I got to make it work. I invested, more money than I care to mention in an idea that like just wasn't, I don't think it was supposed to be mine. I think it's a good idea. I just don't think it was ever supposed to be mine. And Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert talks about how like you can like catch an idea, and then like she caught an idea and then ended up being like Ann Patchett's idea or something like that for one of her books. So it felt that way to me. So it took a lot of like deep conversations with myself and people like you and the teacher we worked with, Lola, and friends, for me to be like, okay, actually, I don't like doing this. And what I want to talk about is like more deep spiritual, edgy things. I want to talk about this concept of belonging. That feels like my life path and is like an onion that's constantly unfolding, something I can't really get bored with. And I had this like following of people, and they weren't the right people. I'll tell you what, they were not the right people, and they certainly weren't aligned with me politically. So
Mm.
I feel very grateful to like shed that skin. But yeah, I basically, long story short, and it wasn't as simple as it making it sound, I made the shift and let go of the job list, let go of all those offerings, and claimed my name and myself in my work. And that was in 2016. And oh, I'm so glad I did. Haven't really looked back. It's always funny to talk about it. So I'm like, oh, I had another life, and I knew you then.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm me now. I'm like completely me now, and it just feels so much better.
Yeah, yeah. How did you, with the imposter syndrome? Uh, because I think imposter syndrome can be, just our fears and our insecurities emerging. And sometimes when we get those inklings, um, it's also telling us, like, to your point, you may really love this, but maybe this isn't your space. And I am also a manifesting generator, and I also really like to foster this and help grow that and nurture this. And then at the end of the day, I'm super burnout and like actually not putting energy into any one thing. Don't do that anymore, but used to. And so with the imposter syndrome, like, how did you sort through that at the time and really hear what your higher self was trying to tell you?
Well, it was like a lot of shame for many years, and I couldn't even verbalize it. And then I just started verbalizing it because I was in these really beautiful containers where we were just like telling the truth. And I hadn't really had that before. So these circles of people who were curious about their passions and going through like major life transitions, and we were in one,
Mm-hmm.
together. And I just, it was eating at me so much. And I was hearing people talk about like, oh, imposter syndrome is like, it's a story about yourself, but it's not what's really going on. And I was like, I actually think it's telling me,
Mm.
like, I don't want to say it was right, but it kind of was. Like, it was telling me this isn't you.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I felt shame because I felt like I just wasn't good enough at it. If I just, so
Mm-hmm.
then I would just work harder, push harder, invest more money in it. And then I finally realized, no, it's right. This is not me. And so I just started talking about that. And when I talked about it, the shame shrunk and eventually shriveled away. And I was like, oh, I'm empowered to make a different choice. Oh, it's so easy. It's not easy. What? It's literally just, you just make a choice. Really? And there it is.
Gosh, I love that concept so much, because I think in this culture, and maybe as female identifying folk more, the idea that many things in our lives are our choice. We can choose. And I think that the moment in my own life I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh, I can choose. I can make a different choice. If I chose this, I can unchoose it. And that is so incredibly powerful. So, I just want to give you some props for getting to that place and for leaning into that.
Yeah, thanks. I do wonder about how much our own internalized stories around shame
Mm.
prevent us from that realization, that's ingrained in us from like systems of oppression or like religion or just like familial beliefs or like vows that have been vows of secrecy and shame that have been passed down through the generations, like particularly of female identifying, uh, that make it feel unsafe to just make a different choice.
Hmm.
So it's actually like a deep, I'm like, oh, it's so simple, but I also have reverence for how like massively challenging, edgy, and healing it is to walk into that.
Oh yeah. I come from a family system where I think especially for female identifying members of the family, there's this whole secrecy thing that happens, and there's a currency to secrets. And if you're the holder of the secret, you have the currency, and if you don't, and that is how popularity and things get passed. And I remember at one point somebody asking me if I had shame about something, and truly not understanding at all what shame was, because I I think it was so pervasive that I never really had to look at it as something separate, and having
The
to
water you were swimming in.
yeah, and then having
Yeah.
to learn what it was to even, start the work. And so yeah, it takes gumption, and it takes courage to look at that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I really love about you too, in your journey that I know of you, is um, whether it was in your kind of, maker self, and now the belonging self. And I want to talk about more about belonging, but there's this ancestral passion thread that you have there that is kind of the connective tissue in many ways. And you're one of the first people that I knew that was really digging into an ancestral past, and has a passion for helping other people to uncover theirs and explore, what our ancestors have to say for us, and how they're here to support us and that kind of thing. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that you see it as a thread between the two, not selves, but like projects of my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's helped me too, to not be like, oh, that was a waste of time. Like that was not a waste of time. It was a beautiful step in the process of me returning to an understanding that feels deeply important, like a mission really for me to share is remembering and returning to ancestral ways. And that all started with my desire, working in like the 25th floor of a high rise in San Francisco on an online marketing platform, to be like, I want to put my hands in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
I just have this incredible compulsion to like go to the farmer's market and like smell vegetables. Like it was that simple, and I want to have like slow dinners by candlelight, and I want to like wrap things in craft paper and twine, and I want to like dry herbs from the ceiling. And I didn't really have any more. I just liked the aesthetic of it, honestly. That was what drew me in. I thought it was pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just got deeper and deeper and deeper until I started having like, honestly, like dreams and visions, and like very visual. They could be memories, they could be just like beautiful imagery for me, whatever you want to name it, of like women and beings coming together at the table next to the hearth, making medicine and tying plant bundles, and helping, like supporting each other womb to tomb, helping people birth, helping people die. And it lit me up. And from the beginning of the Dab list, I was talking and thinking about that. I think it was my way of justifying that I wasn't just like a crafty gal. There's nothing against that, but you know what I mean? I had a judgment. And so I had to be like, this is deeper. And it was true.
Mm-hmm.
So this desire to work with our hands, no matter who we are, is an ancient one, and one we're often deprived of in these, we're just on the screens, and especially in these pandemic times, like we have to be. And there's a part of us that remembers the ways our ancestors lived. And I believe that we can be like on our screens, but also incorporate those ways. And there are many of those ways. Those ways can be making soup into our lives to help us feel our nervous systems regulate, a sense of like we're okay, and so that's the journey I've been on ultimately, that helps me connect every step of my life, from like my first memory, is just like, oh, it's brought me to this, and that'll bring me to my next thing.
Mm. So I want to touch on two things that you said earlier that I think are really important. One is um, and you just said it again, that each thing got you to the next place and the next place and the next place. And so then nothing in our lives then is really ever a mistake. And we can make the choice to evolve anything at any time. We can kill things that aren't serving us anymore. We can birth new things. And going back to shame, there's no shame in any of that, because these lives are here for us to hand create. And part of that means having a really active role in birthing and killing things to bring that life forward in the way that is most authentic to us and that is most fulfilling and pleasurable for us.
Yes, yes. The cycles of life, death, rebirth, life, death, rebirth. I mean, nature shows us that every year with the seasons. The moon shows us that every cycle, like the sun shows us that every day, that, what is done is left, and then what is new is coming. And that we are a part of that. Like, we are nature, we are wild. And I'm in the dawning of a new time in my life. I'm going through a massive life transition into my matrescence. I gave birth 22 weeks ago, and literal birth. And sometimes people say I give birth, and in like spiritual context, I'm like, what are we talking about here?
We're talking about a human.
A baby came out of my body. And so I bring that up to say, like, it's so important for us to remember that we're not supposed to always be in spring, and that's like a growing and a productivity, and we're not always supposed to be in fall of like harvesting and getting it done, and it's okay to let things die and know that it all reseeds for the next iteration.
There's so much comfort in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's so much peace that comes with that, and along with that, rest and just existing in the space in between without hustling, without productivity, and seeing what does bubble up through the ground.
Oh yeah, rest is what's missing so much from the culture. Our ancestors knew how to rest.
Man, did they ever?
They really did. Yeah. I mean, you and I are recording this in January, and it's still winter. Like, winter's not over December 31st. Like, it's so funny how January 1st happens and everyone's like, well, okay, let's make the plans and do, it's like, no, our ancestors rested for a few more months,
Yeah.
like depending where they lived, maybe even longer, so yeah, it's so key. And it's so important. It helps the parts of me that really like resist things like rest, or resist things like living slowly, resist, the how long the lesson takes or the pursuit takes or whatever it is, to just remember, like, there is a different, like, before these systems and messages happened and came to me, like, there was a different way of being, and that's never left. So we can just opt out and opt into a different way.
Yeah, we can remember what is actually there inside us and inside our DNA, and resurrect that when we need it.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with somebody about rest, somebody who's also very much a doer. And I said, hey, have you ever just taken a day without an agenda and just let the day unfold? If you get up in the morning and you feel like making cinnamon buns, and that's what you do. If you feel like going straight to the couch, then that's what you do. But you just let your whatever is going to be pleasurable for you that day guide you through the day. And so it becomes a day of just existing in the space in between. And he was like, that is a terrifying prospect. I'm going to try it. And he did. And I think it was really healing for him. And the idea then is to replicate that as much as possible, so that our nervous systems and our emotional body and our physical body have the rest that they need.
Yeah, that idea terrifies me too, and I am in this work professionally.
It's Yeah.
But it's also like all that I desire, you know? So
Mhm.
it's right. I'm playing the long game here to get to that.
Like the decoupling from what's been culturally handed down and getting back to that which is actually embedded in our DNA and within ourselves as
Yeah.
animals, you know,
Yeah.
on Earth.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into mamahood because 22 weeks, that's really new. And one of the things I said on a previous podcast here that I really appreciate is when I see you speaking truth about the pregnancy, the birth, the infancy, because I myself didn't love most of that. I had a pretty uncomfortable pregnancy. Birth was atrocious for many reasons, and infancy was really, really hard. And it was all around, lack of sleep, loss of identity, feeling like my body was taken over by this foreign object, and then not having, a manual for how I was supposed to then bring this person home from the hospital and just like be a mom. It's ridiculous when you say it like that. So I'm really I so honor you for the truth telling that you do. And I'd love to hear just about all of that stuff and the consciousness of motherhood and how that's changed you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I'm sorry you had a hard time. Ugh, every time I hear a parent, particularly the birthing parent, share that, I'm so grateful they're sharing it. And I'm just like so sad that
Mm,
that is the experience. And like a little ragey. Postpartum rage is so real right now.
so real.
So I'm very much in the process. I love this term matrescence, like adolescence, right? That you're coming in. It's not like a switch is flipped and you're a mother or a parent, right? It takes time. And I really love Rochelle Garcia Saliga of Innate Traditions. And she talks about it's actually, um, a many year process. And that the more you can grieve, the easier it goes.
Oh,
It's
that
like,
is gorgeous.
isn't that the truth? Isn't that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been really working on the moments I feel real contraction or anger. Honestly, I'm realizing there's room for grief to move through. Yeah. So what can I say? Um, well, my own personal journey, I had many pregnancy losses, and just really, so it was, my child was very much consciously conceived, and the pregnancy was filled with fear and nausea, and then I had my baby. I had a beautiful birth experience, but it was long, and I definitely thought I was dying, literally, and um was up for about 48 hours straight, so started kind of hallucinating, and that was kind of cool now that I think about it, but in the moment it really freaked me out. And then I had a baby, and I haven't slept since. I have a little, but not much. And and then the hormonal experiences in the body, my experience has been, oh, and in a pandemic, PS,
Mm,
in a pandemic.
mm,
My experience has been one of incredible loneliness and anxiety. And I wanted this child so badly. And I am also someone who's very much into this, revillaging, and I thought I had it all set up, and I have the means to have postpartum doulas, and there's one in the other room holding my child right now. And I just really thought it was enough. And what I realized, and from talking to so many mamas in my DMs on Instagram, many of whom have full-time nannies, that it is never enough,
mm,
because the greater symptom is the loss of the village. And even that sounds cliche, so I'll just like take it back. My ancestors come from old Europe, which is a term Maria Gimbutas, who is a anthropologist, a term she coins for what is known as the European continent and outer islands, before the Indo-European invasion. So very much pre-Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
My ancestors are from all those lands. And there was something called the Burning Times that happened starting in the 1400s, that lasted for many hundreds of years. And the target of the burnings and the killings and the murders were the ones who knew about conception, preventing conception, pregnancy loss, how to support mothers. And Rochelle Garcia Saliga really nailed this for me. So in the taking away of that knowledge, a few survived, right? And here in the United States, most of like the midwifery and doula birth workers are descended from Black women, because the white women didn't survive.
Right.
What's happened is the fields of obstetrics and basically pregnancy and postpartum has been pathologized, and you are broken and need medicating, or you're doing it badly if you cannot feel you can survive it. And it's just such bullshit. I hope I can swear.
Oh, it's welcome here.
Okay, it's just such bullshit, because every single mother I speak to has an experience of suffering, no matter their means. And I really fucking feel for the single mothers right now. Like how it is not natural to do it in a nuclear family setup, let alone single. And we should not feel shame for having any experience that feels traumatizing or anxiety producing or depressing or any of those things. And I'm not judging how anyone deals with it. We got to make the choices we got to make in order to survive, like getting back to work. That's a whole thing. So my commentary right now is from this place of real grief for what mothers have lost over hundreds, if not thousands of years, and yet are still a part of creating like life. It's like, if we just listen to the mothers and the parents, how different like society would function, how different governments would form, and policies would happen, and what would be abolished, what would be gone now. Because I do believe and have felt, and in the simultaneous time of really falling in love with my beloved child, like how messed up the system is around a person choosing to create life. It's so hard. It's so hard. Pregnancy can be hard. Birth can be hard. Recovery can be hard. I mean, I could talk about so many things, like the expectations around sex, the expectations around body image, and how one should look, and the expectations around sleep and what we have to do in order to get sleep, or we never get sleep, and just the branding, the one-dimensional branding of motherhood, particularly on social media, doesn't allow for all the nuanced experiences.
No, and it's worth touching on too, just the way that the culture itself has painted motherhood in the light that if you aren't just glowing with gratitude and happiness every single second for the experiences that you're having with your child, then there is something wrong with you. Okay, well, that's like with anything in life, not realistic at all. And it's really unfair to drive shame around something that is epically hard, that most people, as you note, are doing it hopefully with another person, but maybe not, in which case it's unimaginably hard, but definitely not with the support of, a group like we would have had back in the day to help provide perspective and to help shoulder all the things, right? Because the other thing is that there's also this culture of all these shoulds about the baby and how you should be with the baby and how the baby should be and how it all is supposed to work. But again, we're all humans, and the truth is any way that you have to do things together to be healthy and happy and content is the way to do it for you. So for a culture to be telling us all these, to be shooting on us all the time is just, it makes me so mad.
Yeah. Yeah. So two things that come to mind with what you just said. One, it creates the culture of secrets, right? Just to go back to where we started with um, the not sharing of the truth,
Yeah.
even from like parent to child, as the child becomes parent because of the shame or the feeling broken. And the other thing this brings to mind is like what is then put upon the child, out of suffering, out of desperation, is the child then seen as a problem to fix?
Right.
This is like a multi-layered prism of things. It's like a web. I'm just like constantly pulling the thread to find the next thing. But it's really got me fired up in a way that feels it's so much beyond just motherhood. I'm just like, oh, what about people who are grieving? What about people who are completing relationships? Like, what about, there's so many areas of like massive shift of of a transition of life where something happens and there's such a nuanced experience, and the culture doesn't, we just like aren't modeled for how to support and how to navigate it. So I don't know, maybe that's a clue about what this like next phase of my life is about, but I feel pretty fired up about it.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this, I think, for a long time, but the removal of especially women's roles as the transition navigators for the community, right?
Yeah.
Yes, birth doula, yes, death doula, but everything in between.
Everything.
Every transition had a ceremony or a ritual to market, and everybody knew it was happening, and they were able to integrate it into their systems and into the community. And there were no secrets about this person's transition to old age and this person's birth, and the community was there to support it because the women were there putting their arms around the whole thing and shepherding the process. And once that went by the wayside, to your point about birth specifically, we don't know how to do that anymore, and it's not prioritized in this society, and so much of that is lost. I would love to see that come back in a really big way, and it's part of my passion for death doulaing is in some form or function bring it back around something. Birth doulaing,
Yes.
awesome, love it. Midwifery, let's get it integrated into other parts of life.
Oh, yes. I mean, birth and death are two sides of the same door. Like, I'd say as excited as we are about birth, we need to be putting that energy towards death. I've talked a lot about that. Yeah, the rites of passage, the ceremony, the witnessing by the community, the normalizing of it all, that seems to be essential.
Yeah. So you touched on this a little bit earlier too, but relationship evolution, and especially around having a child, but in general throughout life. I know you've navigated some of that too, and wondering if you're willing just to talk about that a little bit, because it's big. There's a huge relationship impact on any transition of life, and that's also something that we don't really talk about that much.
Yeah, and this has me thinking also about how the nuclear family model is just puts too much pressure on partners. Uh I mean, I could go down a rabbit hole and be like, monogamy, but for the time being, I'll stick with.
I don't know if we have that much time, but we should
Yeah,
come back to it.
yeah. I mean, yeah, so my partner Tim and I have been together almost 16 years. And so we had a child later into the partnership, right? And so we've done a lot of work. We've had many shedding of ourselves and becoming different people, and yet being the same. We've grown together. We were babies when we met. And I'm actually really grateful for that foundation, because I felt like having a baby like threw a bomb in our marriage. It was like,
Sure.
and all of a sudden I felt different. I mean, all I cared about was this baby, and I just didn't care about him at all. And I had read about it. There's this amazing book I'm reading called, one second, let me grab it.
Yeah, do.
It's Maternity: Coming Face to Face with Your Own Shadow by Lara Gutman.
Oh God, that's powerful.
I had to put it down a few times. I was like, whoa, that's a little close. That's a little tender.
I know that one.
But I read it. I read one section before I gave birth that was like, you will turn away from your partner completely.
Oh.
And I did, and it was really rough for him. I was just talking to Bethany, who's our postpartum doula, basically like my sister wife now. Just like my attempt at revillaging is having her with us, and we were just talking about how we need to normalize the major shift that a partnership experiences when a baby comes. And I also wonder, I have a friend whose husband was just diagnosed with advanced cancer, and the drastic shift in like her becoming caretaker.
Oh.
And also primary parent, and then he was like the strong provider, now becoming the one who needs to be tended to, and like the dynamic shift there. And we've been sort of like just talking about the mirroring in each of our experiences in different ways, but also like she felt like a bomb went off in her marriage, where it's just like, okay, so we have this one idea, and like Disney tells us things or whatever, and then if you choose to be with a partner for a long period of time, there is inevitably going to be events that shift the dynamic. And I wouldn't say Tim and I responded to it beautifully. And we definitely were like, therapists now, everyone needs support. But I do feel like, having been together 15 years before then, and doing work, you and I were talking about how I went to I really love John Wineland, who talks a lot about intimacy and sexual yoga, which is a breathwork thing, and polarity, and understanding the masculine, feminine, but not in a gendered way. We went to a John Wineland intensive when I was 12 weeks pregnant, and I just feel like that was like the smartest little wise soul self decision I ever made, because we used techniques we learned that weekend a lot in the first 6 weeks, where he was just like voicing his experiences and I was voicing mine, and we just let them be heard in the space where I could actually say, like, I have no interest in you right now. Get away. I feel the primal wolf mother need to just be with my cub. Please leave. But also you need to feed us, and can you?
Right.
And he could be like, I feel rejected. I feel unsupported. And then what I realized was I was putting this is actually so interesting. I was projecting onto him what I think mothers of the past would have received from like 20 people. Like in the nuclear family model, when there's just two parents, but what we need is a village. are we just putting the whole village on the other person?
Okay, you know what? My spine just lit up in tingles. Yes, and um, there's such a similarity with how we approach supporting people after death with this as well, in terms of the way people try to be of support, but we don't have enough familiarity with death, so we don't really know how to do that. So all of a sudden, instead of having all of these layers of support, you have 20 macaroni casseroles, right?
Exactly.
And so in your scenario, then you're wanting all the support that you would normally get from the village, but there's one person in your household. And you know, I think, by the way, saying to your partner early on, like, oh, therapist, I think that is actually approaching it really well, because you had a little, you know, you've been sitting in this really conscious approach to your relationship and working on some of that stuff for a while. And so to be able to pull those tools out and to make that call early instead of letting it fester, that's amazing.
Yeah, our therapist was saying most couples realize this about a year or two after the baby is born. And things are, I guess, like if you map like divorce rates, they're often the first 2 years after a baby is born.
Yeah. And I would have had awareness about this stuff. I do wonder, I mean, I do see that the impact of a child, what the impact of a child makes on a couple, and have experienced that myself. And when we got divorced when Zach was 3, and we went to therapy when it was too late. And what if we would have been more conscious about a relationship, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and this is where I just have so much compassion for like the impossibleness of like we're being set up. I just feel like we're like sold this like beautiful, like it's gonna be, Breeze, you're gonna be such great parents. Oh, it's all intuitive. And like, yes, it's beautiful. And we are not given enough tools. We are not modeled enough, so that there's a lot of silent suffering. You know, like there is. And sometimes when I share this on social media, I get the DMs like, well, you know, but isn't she worth it? I'm like, okay, yes. And also, can I make it okay to say these shadowy things?
Right.
Like, don't, like, you're trying to shush me because I'm making you feel uncomfortable, but like, they're both true.
I'm going to say something really that will be received controversial right now, but it is truth, and it is my truth. And my daughter is 13, and she's sitting across the hall, well and good, and probably hear her in the background on this podcast as she's playing video games. But when she was an infant, and we were navigating it ourselves, and we hadn't slept in weeks and weeks, and she started crying at 5 p.m. every night and kept crying till 11 p.m. every night and wasn't sleeping, I remember walking around with her and thinking, okay, I get it. This is why people drown their children in the bathtub.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. And no, I never had any intent of doing that. And yes, I love my baby very much. And also, that suffering is fucking real.
And it's a symptom of a broken system. It's not your fault.
Right.
It's not our fault. That's what I think I just want to scream from the rooftops. Like, do you see? Like, this is a symptom of something that's just like not okay.
I think that you're feeling the title of this podcast. It's not your fucking fault.
It's not your fucking fault. Yeah, it's deep and it's wide, and yeah, next step is just talking to your fellow parents or anyone. Yeah, like actually go beyond the parent circle, please. You know, my like childless friends are like, thank you for saying this. I had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, thank you for receiving it, you know? So we're not siloed.
Yeah, the vulnerability of just saying, yeah, so this is my experience, you know, whatever that is. It could be about birth, it could be about raising a child, it could be about your job or anything that you're experiencing. But
yeah,
you know, getting more comfortable with saying, this is my experience and I'm having a hard time, could go a long way for a lot of us in a lot of areas. 1 minute.
Oh, you're muted.
It's an emergency. I'll edit this out.
Okay.
Not really an emergency. So one of the benefits, if we can say there's a benefit at all, of this pandemic time period is the emergence of the idea of grief as something that is not solely tied to death. Or I guess a greater awareness that grief exists on multiple levels around many, many things that happen in our lives. And that is also something that's not really, that we're not indoctrinated into. And so I've seen a lot of great conversations happening in social media where people will say, you know, gosh, I feel this sadness, you know, they're having the effects of grief and then realizing, oh, they have grief simply about existing in the world today with what's going on. And that's a beautiful awareness to be raised.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I do see and feel the conversation going way beyond death. The conversation around mental health and even just like the conversation around nervous system regulation, I feel very excited about that.
Yes.
I feel very, very excited about just the conversation around normalizing mental health medication, normalizing therapy, normalizing understanding like what's behind anxiety, normalizing all of it. Like people being like, I'm in a depressive episode right now. I'm like, whoa.
Thank you for saying so.
Cool. Thank you. What do you need? Yeah. Oh, I'll just sit here with you, yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, plant medicines, nutrition, movement, all of the things and how useful they are to us and how normalized all the things are becoming it is an exciting outcome. And I am very nervous for the state of our collective mental health coming out of this situation.
Yeah.
But I do see a little bit of hope in the emergence of these other conversations in a bigger way.
Same. I actually haven't had the hope, but I do now that I'm talking to you. I've been sort of in a little bit of like oh no, what's gonna happen? Kind of a feeling when I'm up late at night breastfeeding my child, like doom scrolling, which I don't recommend. But you're right. There is a deeper, maybe because of this, there is a deeper awareness of the need to tend to each other in a different way and not just have that individualist bootstrap mentality that got us into this mess in the first place.
Maybe it will be one stepping stone on the path toward greater community.
That's the hope, huh?
Yeah.
I
think that's a good place for us to end today, although I could talk to you for hours. And I'm so delighted to be connected with you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to tell people where to find you?
Oh, yeah, sure. I have a podcast too, if you're into podcasts, because you're listening to this one. It's called Belonging. So if you just look up Belonging, I'm not the mega church. I'm the I'm the one with like the seasonal wreath. That's me. Easy to delineate. And then on Instagram, I'm not doing a whole lot right now because I'm just like, in my matrescence, but Becca Piastrelli. If you look, if you don't, Instagram finds me even if you don't spell it right. Just Becca Piastrelli on Instagram. If you're into it, I'm there too.
That's amazing. And you are doing a lot right now because the conversations that you're having are really meaningful and really truthful and important for people to see. So thank you again for being you. Highly recommend the Belonging podcast. Everybody jump over there when you're done with this one, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.